Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here are some of today's top stories. Violence erupted at UCLA and classes were canceled on Wednesday. More on the escalating protests. Speaker Johnson could soon face a vote to oust him from the job. Congresswoman Greene says she plans to move her motion soon. Former President Trump visited Wisconsin and Michigan for campaign events. He says immigration remains one of his top issues. Violence erupts at UCLA as clashes between pro-Palestinian protesters and Israel supporters escalate, prompting law enforcement intervention and class cancellations. NTD's Christina Crona gives us the latest update on the story.
The violence broke out around 11 p.m. on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, when approximately 50 counter-protesters dressed in dark clothing with hoods and white masks stormed the barricade, attempting to dismantle it. Footage shows the two groups striking each other with bats and wooden objects.
One of my friends has a massive bump on the back of his head. He just got whacked when he was up here. I mean, they were coming up here and just like violently attacking us.
Unarmed security guards had to retreat as fireworks were fired at the encampment, exploding close to the tents at Royce Quad.
We had people mazing us, beating us with bats and sticks, throwing whatever they could to us, and none of this law enforcement was here at all.
One student says law enforcement was slow to respond.
It's kind of foolish that law enforcement didn't decide to step in when people were being beaten with metal bats, maced, yelling very threatening things.
UCLA officials requested the LAPD to intervene on campus during the early hours of Wednesday to restore order and ensure public safety.
It's crazy right now. There's a lot of police out here. A lot of cars right now, so this is crazy.
The situation seemed to have calmed down in the hours following the police arrival. No arrests were made. The Jewish Federation of Los Angeles said in a statement, "The abhorrent actions of a few counter-protesters last night do not represent the Jewish community or our values. We believe in peaceful civic discourse." Unfortunately, the violence at UCLA is a result of the lack of leadership from the chancellor and the UCLA administration. However, the violence prompted the university to cancel all classes on Wednesday. Governor Gavin Newsom addressed the violence on X, stating, "The right to free speech does not extend to inciting violence, vandalism, or lawlessness on campus." Officials also declared that Royce Hall will remain closed until Friday, and Powell Library will not reopen until Monday. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Police are starting to take more definitive action on the anti-Israel protests happening on college campuses across the nation. Authorities just cleared out encampments at University of Wisconsin-Madison and Tulane. That's after NYPD stepped in at Columbia University last night. Here's New York Mayor Eric Adams commenting.
Those who broke into the building did include students. It was led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university. The school needed the NYPD's assistance to clear Hamilton Hall and the encampments outside. There were those who were never concerned about free speech. They were concerned about chaos. It was about external actors hijacking peaceful protests and influencing students to escalate. There's nothing peaceful about barricading buildings, destroying property, or dismantling security cameras.
NYPD officers cleared the encampment at Columbia University and reclaimed Hamilton Hall. Police arrested close to 300 people and said most were from City College. They faced preliminary charges ranging from trespassing to criminal mischief. The NYPD is working to find out who were students and who were external actors. The school has asked the police to stay on campus until mid-May after commencement. Amid the anti-Israel protests, at least one school has reached an agreement with the student protesters. Brown University says they will consider divesting from Israel. Now let's take a look at other top headlines. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel today, meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and families of hostages. He's pushing for a ceasefire deal between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group.
We're determined to get a ceasefire that brings the hostages home and to get it now. And the only reason that wouldn't be achieved is because of Hamas. There is a proposal on the table, and as we've said, no delays, no excuses. The time is now, and the time is now long past due to bring the hostages home to their families.
The current round of talks appears to be serious, but the sides remain far apart on one key issue: whether the war should end as part of an emerging deal. A senior Hamas official says they are studying the recent ceasefire offer, but they don't want to be pressured. Blinken says the deal would allow much-needed food, medicine, and water to get into Gaza. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is urging world leaders to stand against the International Criminal Court. Israel recently said the court is contemplating issuing arrest warrants on war crime charges. The U.S. stated that the court has no jurisdiction to do so. House Speaker Mike Johnson is on thin ice with his job. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene signals that she will move forward with an attempt to oust him, just one day after House Democrat leaders promised to back the Republican majority speaker. Here's the Congresswoman speaking at a press conference earlier this morning.
And I voted for Mike Johnson because his voting record before he became speaker was conservative. But once he became speaker, he has become a man that none of us recognize. He passed 3 continuing resolutions. And then he finally passed a 2-part omnibus that fully funded Joe Biden's agenda and the Democrat agenda, funded the Department of Justice that wants to put President Trump in jail for the rest of his life, which is a death sentence.
House Speaker Mike Johnson said Tuesday it was the first that he had heard of Democrat leaders signaling they will help him keep his job. He says it's no time to be playing politics and engaging in chaos. Johnson has come under fire from some Republicans for his role in passing the $95 billion emergency spending bill last month. A small number of GOP members could oust Johnson as Speaker, but only if Democrats vote with them. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and other Democratic leaders say they won't just let that happen. Congresswoman Greene filed a motion to vacate with the House clerk last month, but the effort hasn't picked up momentum.
Hello, Wisconsin. How are you, Wisconsin? It's great to be back in this beautiful state, and it is indeed a beautiful state. It's beautiful.
Former President Trump visited the battleground states of Wisconsin and Michigan for campaign events today, marking his first major campaign event since the New York hush money trial began on April 15th. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, Trump talked about the impact of inflation on households, crime, and his plans to crack down on illegal immigration. The latest Gallup poll released yesterday shows 27% of Americans believe immigration is the most crucial issue the U.S. is facing. So far, Border Patrol encountered almost 8 million illegal immigrants during the Biden administration. A Harvard-Harris poll conducted last week found that immigration and inflation tied as the most crucial issues. Both stood at 35%. California's population is increasing for the first time since 2020. Reasons for this stem from more lenient border policies, Mediterranean climate, and educational opportunities.
The nation's most populous state is growing again, ending a trend of population decline. According to an estimate released Tuesday by the State Department of Finance, California gained just over 67,000 people last year, the first increase since 2020. In a press release, Governor Gavin Newsom said, "People from across the nation and the globe are coming to the Golden State to pursue the California dream and experience the success of the world's 5th largest economy. From the Inland Empire to the Bay Area, regions throughout California are growing, strengthening local communities and boosting our state's future." The report found that the population increased mostly in the Bay Area, Central Valley, and the Inland Empire. Los Angeles County grew by 0.05% and Orange County grew by 0.31%. The governor's office attributes much of the increase to international immigrants becoming California citizens. However, data from the Finance Department shows longtime residents continue to leave California. Over 505,000 people left for other states last year. According to the Finance Department, the increase from recent years is a result of more lenient border policies from President Joe Biden's administration as compared to former President Donald Trump's restrictions.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. Dozens of Google employees are fired for protesting an Israel-related project. They're now trying to get their jobs back. A third lawsuit was filed this week over Biden's updates to Title IX. See why the plaintiffs are calling these changes dangerous to female athletes. One species could soon be removed from the endangered list due to a recent bill's passage in Congress. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. Dozens of fired Google employees are trying to get their jobs back. Google fired the employees saying they caused disruptions by protesting the Israel-related project. What's at stake in this legal complaint? I spoke with NTD's David Lam for the story. So David, could you please tell us a little bit more about the Google employees' protests?
Yeah, David, as a result of the sit-in protests, Google fired 28 employees for their involvement. So these protesters were unhappy with Project Nimbus, which is a $1.2 billion deal with the Israeli government to supply AI technology or cloud computing services to the government. And they were saying that the system is being deployed in the Israel-Hamas war, but Google denies the allegation. So what's at stake here is the controversy over weighing the right to protest and whether it interferes with people's public safety and disrupting organizations.
So what are the terminated workers demanding now in their complaint?
So the former employees want their jobs back, and they want Google to have a statement saying that they will not violate workers' rights to organize. And the complaint also says that about 50 workers were fired or either put on leave in April, and that Google retaliated to a non-disruptive protest to their terms and conditions of work that's related to that, according to the complaint. Now, Google said that the workers' conduct was unacceptable and that employees they felt threatened and felt unsafe. So the firings happened after the employees held the protests at Google offices in New York and Sunnyvale, California. Now, David, we've seen protests happen after October 7th when Hamas terrorists invaded southern Israel, and the Israeli government said that 1,200 people died on that day and about 250 were kidnapped as hostages.
Now, does it seem that Google has a right to fire employees for protesting?
Yeah, David, so people do have a right to freedom of speech and to protest. But in this case, Google said that these protesters were disrupting and occupying workspaces inside Google's buildings. So Google has been tolerant in the past and open to activism. But after these firings, the CEO said that Google is a workplace and it is a business. So Google said that this Nimbus contract is not directed towards military use or related to weapons or intelligence services. So what's next is the National Labor Relations Board. They didn't immediately put a timeline on when to review the case, but that's the next step.
Well, David, thank you so much for updating us on this controversy of protesting at a time when protests also erupt on university campuses. Please keep us posted.
Thanks, David.
6 more states are suing the Biden administration over recent changes made to Title IX. It's the third lawsuit filed this week, bringing a combined 12 states challenging the updates in court. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
Another lawsuit was announced on Tuesday, suing Biden for changes made to Title IX. In a Tuesday press conference, Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti called the Title IX overhaul dangerous and said the Federal Department of Education has no authority to let boys into girls' locker rooms.
This is being done for ideological reasons that I think are so far divorced from the practicalities of why we have these sex-separated spaces.
Skermeti said that under the new rules, even questioning somebody's gender identity could constitute illegal sexual harassment.
So if a boy wanders into a girl's locker room, people will feel deterred from challenging that because they could get in trouble just for asking questions. There are people out there who are dangerous people. There are creepy people out there who want to get into these private spaces.
Title IX was drafted in 1972 and was intended to prohibit discrimination in federally funded schools based on sex. The changes made by Biden broaden it to include sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, and sex stereotypes. Schools that don't cooperate risk losing federal funding.
They're trying to put a gun to the head of the states and say you have to accept our wild-eyed interpretations of what Title IX means or risk losing massive quantities of money.
Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and Virginia are the plaintiffs in the case. At the announcement, former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines advocated for the suit.
Across the country and in various sports, males are entering women's athletic competitions, being given spots on women's teams, and being granted entry into our locker rooms.
Gaines gave a first-hand account of competing against transgender athlete Leah Thomas at the 2022 NCAA National Swimming and Diving Championships.
In addition to losing out on trophies and roster spots and podium spots to Thomas, we also had to share a locker room and change in front of this 6'4", fully intact naked male.
Two other similar lawsuits were filed this week. On Monday, Texas and Louisiana also filed suit challenging Biden's Title IX changes. Also on Monday, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina, along with the Independent Women's Forum and two other advocacy groups, filed a separate lawsuit over Title IX. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Now turning to sports, a major shakeup is underway as the SEC and Big Ten are in talks about a groundbreaking revenue-sharing plan involving players. Here's more.
The SEC and Big Ten are considering a new revenue-sharing initiative involving college players, dubbed the Modern Model. This proposal not only aims to redefine how student athletes are compensated, but also seeks to address the ongoing House v. NCAA lawsuit. The lawsuit, slated for trial in January 2025, alleges collusion between the NCAA and power conferences to suppress athletes' earnings. Settlement figures could reach between $15 to $20 million per university, causing frustration among athletic directors grappling with budget reallocation. ESPN's report sheds light on discussions among the Power Four conferences, saying there could be a shift in how collegiate sports manage revenue. Despite uncertainties regarding revenue sources and distribution, insiders suggest that the concept of revenue sharing stemmed from ongoing deliberations between Power Four administrators. It's been gaining momentum since the formation of a joint advisory group by the SEC and Big Ten in February. Jeffrey Kessler, representing the House plaintiffs, remains silent about the plan's potential impact on the lawsuit's outcome. However, billions are potentially at stake, and the SEC and Big Ten are asserting their influence by demanding a significant share of college football playoff revenue. These conferences often serve not just as major players, but influential decision makers in the collegiate sports arena.
There is a new bill aimed at terminating federal protection for gray wolves. Lawmakers vote on a bill that could delist them as endangered species in all lower 48 states. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the story.
U.S. House Republicans have passed a bill under Trust the Science Act to remove gray wolves from the endangered species list in most of the country, despite the Biden administration's opposition. The bill, introduced by Colorado Representative Lauren Boebert, passed 209 to 205, with a few Democrats joining Republicans in support. The bill has emerged amid a nationwide discussion regarding the future of wolves. Hunters and farmers nationwide argue that the wolf population is stable, citing citing concerns about wolf attacks on game species and livestock. They advocate for legal permission to kill these animals. However, conservationists argue that the wolf population remains delicate due to near extinction from hunting in the 1960s. In 2011, Congress removed Endangered Species Act protection from gray wolves in the northern Rocky Mountains, and the Trump administration did the same for the rest of the continental U.S. in 2020. However, a federal judge blocked the change except in the northern Rocky Mountains. The White House said on Monday that the bill could interfere with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's science-based planning for wolf recovery. The agency is working on a national plan due next year, but it's uncertain if the bill will pass the Senate. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Stay tuned for China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer coming up next. How much money does Beijing actually spend on its military? A new report reveals shocking estimates. That and more on China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's all we've got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.